Hey.
Hey, there he is.
Hi, Peter.
Reno, what's up?
Yeah, I'm up. That's the main thing. Standing.
All right.
Come on in. I'd go anything. I could do anything. That's my problem. I could do anything, but what the real opportunity I got was to be able to teach and then go away on my own. You know, I mean, I could have been a scientist and, you know, got the microscope eye and just picked at it for 20 years, but no, I'm good at a lot of things. We're always good at a lot of things, but the thing is to take the opportunity that really sings to your heart, you know, and do that and pays something, you know. And so in those days, excitement was always, for me, was in the school because I didn't have any brothers and sisters. So there was always the teams, there were always the people, the teachers, that kind of thing. So that kind of life was something that I went after. Started everything I did. I mean, the first student teaching job I had was at Jefferson High School, and then I was going off on an expedition that summer, and I was walking out the last day of my student teaching, and I never really wanted to be a super teacher. I never wanted to do that much, but I just wanted a job, you know, and to keep moving. And the principal says, well, the boys upstairs say you're doing great. I'll never forget that. And it's like, if you want a job, see my secretary in the morning. Boy.
So where were you born?
I was born in San Francisco, California, St. Joseph's Hospital, you know, and it was July 15th, 1941, long time ago.
So your parents were both Italian?
They were very Italian. I mean, yeah, I didn't think there were any other people in the world except Italian until I guess I was 10 years old or something. I mean, it was, even in the neighborhood I grew up, it was all Italian.
And what neighborhood was that?
It was the Excelsior district, and it, you know, that part of San Francisco was pretty well populated by Italian folks, but there were other folks around. But of course, in my case, we never mixed with them, you know. It was always, the neighbors were all Italian, everybody was Italian, so.
So were your parents born here as well? Or?
No, they came over. My mom came over as a young girl. She was about 15 or 16. My father came over right after World War I. He was in World War I as a high altitude climber. No, he was part of the Alpini Corps, and his job was to carry munitions and wood and food up into the Dolomites, up into those mountains in northern Italy, and they fought the Austrians. And
so he was in the Italian army.
Yep.
Yeah,
he was in the army. I mean, my father told me the day when he was conscripted, where these villages are in northern Italy, he says he'd walk down, all the boys would walk down from his village, and they joined other boys coming down from other villages, like kind of like funneling down into this main street. And there at the main street, for the first time, he saw his first vehicle. The first time he ever saw a vehicle, a truck.
So what part of Italy was he from?
This here, he was from the area between Genoa, which is on the coast, and Milan, which is inland. And those are the two main cities. But in the middle, there's a range of mountains going through, right down through the middle, almost like our Sierra Nevada. And those are the Apennine Mountains. And so he was from a little village right in those mountains there. And they're still mountainous today. I mean, yeah.
So when did he come over to the U.S.?
He came over in 20. Let's say 20, around there. And my mom came just about, I think 21, 22, I found.
And where was she from in Italy?
She was from Venice, but in the mountains behind Venice, in a place called Bassano di Grappa. Good food, good people, make grappa.
What did your dad do? What was his
He was a gardener.
occupation?
He was a landscape gardener. Simple. Okay. I still have his lawnmowers out there. Push lawnmower, gardener, San Francisco, hard worker, good man. Met everybody, kept everybody's place going. I think he had about 100 customers. That was his goal, is to have 100 customers, and he had about that. And my mom kept the books, landscape gardening, and I don't even know what those words meant hardly, That was another thing. I mean, we spoke only Italian at home, and I was commanded never to speak it in the streets, ever,
So, where did you teach?
Okay.
Or what did you teach?
I taught biology because, like I said, I went to college. I never liked business. In fact, I hated it. But I was fortunate enough to just walk through the biology building one day, and I saw all this interesting stuff that interested me because I was always outside. My father, I worked with him outside all the time, always. Pushing lawnmowers. He'd drop me off when I was 15 years old, 14 years old, all through high school. I worked with him, had to. And I saw, the natural history stuff that in the hallways, but I also had a chance to see this amazing bunch of photos that was featuring this professor, Larry Swan. And I said, oh, who's Larry Swan? Well, he was famous at San Francisco State at that time because he just got back with Hillary's expedition to Everest. And he was, in those days when they had expeditions, they always had scientists on them. I mean, it was not like, hi, we're going to try and climb it as fast as possible and then advertise potato chips. It wasn't that. These guys were, it was pretty serious. And he was selected to go because, number one, he had a lot of experience being born. He was born in Darjeeling, India, which is way in the Himalayas. And he could speak the language there. He could speak a couple of different languages, but he was a scientist. He was a great one, high-altitude biologist. And this, professor had all these pictures of all the stuff that, happened during that expedition. Anyway, to me, I was fascinated. I said, Jesus, this is something I'm kind of interested in. And so I got involved a little bit, took classes, and became really involved with people I'm still involved with now. I mean, my age, they're all retired, and, so I was with scientists the whole time.
You later worked with kids at risk? What's that
Yeah,
about?
well, that was the 60s, Peter. That was so I signed on in 64, 65. I started a role teaching biology. I inherited this biology class that was taught by a wonderful guy, but it was archaic. I hate to say it because I'm archaic now, but it was archaic. It was just an amazing thing. I said I could spruce this thing up, and I did. I brought a lot of experiential learning into that first class. I remember we never opened a book for a week. I showed them pictures, slides. Oh man, I played records of Woody Guthrie playing about the Dust Bowl. I was trained up as not a biologist, a normal one. We were defining the word ecology at that time. That was a big thing. So traditional biology was kind of out, but I was still teaching in the classroom biology in a very different way, more hands-on, more field trips. In those days, teachers didn't want to do field trips. And a field trip for me was just getting them out of the classroom and picking at the bugs and the bees and all that stuff. A whole curriculum developed of being outside. And a lot of it went into the adventure end of it, a rappel and a climb. And the basic rappel and climb, I remember I started it out was with the Sierra Club, was in Glen Park in San Francisco. Stupid rocks out there. Now they're, or the Junior Museum on Red Rock Hill over there behind that museum over there. Oh, God. Anyway, we did rappels off the mountain, and we did climbs, and the kids loved it, and we had picnics, and we talked about life. And that was kind of like the basis of it. And then, of course, sprinkled throughout the whole thing and covering and blanketing it all was natural history, stuff I knew. You know, the birds, the bees, all that stuff.
Well, tell me about Colma. That was kind of like a little farm area, right?
Yeah, it was. Colma was like going, to me, it was like going to Yosemite, I guess, with my father when I was a kid. Because he had a lot of friends that were Italian. Number one, it was Italian dominated. Not all. There were Germans also. But that's where the pig ranches were, the flower growers were, and the vegetable farmers. The vegetables were big time in Colma. And also, of course, the cemeteries.
Yeah.
The marble orchards.
Yeah.
We call them. But, yeah. My father would go out there on Saturdays sometimes and meet with friends. A lot of this Colma, South San Francisco blended together back in open space hills, right behind Daly City and Colma. There were hills that were rolling before all the houses were built, and that's where all these farms were, and they were wonderful because, I mean, I could remember horses pulling plows over there, big Clydesdales things, and I'll never forget it. There was always a bottle of wine wrapped up in sackcloth or some, wicker on the neck of the horse. and so these guys would do a long plow row, and then at the end they'd turn the animals, the team, and have a swig of wine, and then all the way back to the next one, doing the dirt.
Yeah.
Over there behind El Camino High School now, and Holy Cross Cemetery, and all that. So there was always this blend of agriculture. That mixture of Colma was Italian, was agriculture, was the flower industry, open space. Mostly it was like living comfortably in an open area, like an open park. It was like living in Golden Gate Park, but not being chased by cops. There were no cops. It was, the artichokes were out there. It was calm. It was quiet. There were no, the big industrialization didn't happen yet in terms of shopping centers, and so it was a nice area, Horses were around. I had some kids that came from Brisbane would take a horse to school, do it all the way over the hill and cross and go up there. It was amazing. All the kids that I taught from the other side of the town never saw horses, and so it was interesting. But Colma, I lived in the oldest house in Colma. It was built by an Irish, I believe he was a dentist, I believe. I'm not sure, dentist or doctor. But he built it in I believe it was 1897. And at that zone and that time, grew potatoes. And it was all potatoes all around there. And it was a hell of a house, an old Victorian type of thing on the hill. Oh, it was amazing. The landlady, the Largo Marcinos were the ones that owned that area. And when I came along, I just started teaching, 65, I guess it was. I was living in South San Francisco, renting a place in South San Francisco, and I just said to my class, is there anything around here, anything for sale, for rent, for anything, to the class? I said, yeah, my grandmother's got a house on Collins Avenue down there. It's abandoned, and, So I'll be damned. I go down there, and there was his house, and I got to meet Irene Fram. She was she went through the San Francisco earthquake as a little girl, and the best part about meeting Irene Fram is she was the queen. She was well into her 80s when I met her, and I helped clean up the house and basically just got into living in a very historical house, and it was old, but I kind of spruced it up. It all worked, and the best part about Irene Fram was paying the monthly bill. I'd go over to the house, and she made it into a party. Every time I came in there, the drinks came out, the stories came out, the pictures came out, and I was kind of like just a young guy. I mean, I didn't know what the hell this all meant, but after a couple drinks, I enjoyed it, and so I was looking forward to that, and that was history. That was real history about, she says, yes, Mr. Taini, yes, the day of the earthquake, boy, all the horses, they were right down here. They were all very nervous, very nervous. They were all clumping around and clumping because they used the horses to do all the work in those days. I couldn't believe all this stuff she was telling me, and then she said, yeah, and when the fires came in San Francisco, and all the people, it was springtime, they all were walking down El Camino down there, and anyway.
Experience. I see a lot of African.
Well, I was fortunate enough to get to Africa in 1971, and in those days I was still linked pretty much to science in terms of that was what I studied in college, and I'd I was a pretty good scientist, I mean, in terms of college, I was great. And after college, what do you do with the science? You go to either Smithsonian or some school, and teach and stuff. And so I was with the California Academy of Sciences on one expedition, and that was the one that introduced me to that Jeep out there, that four-wheel drive vehicle. We went to Mexico, and that was in 64, 65. But, and it was an expedition vehicle. But basically, Africa was a place, of course, I'd heard a lot about it. There were a lot of professors that went there and studied all these animals, etc. I was sent there in two ways. One is that I was like a courier, so I took books and all kinds of materials on the cheap to East Africa, Kenya, in 71, while a couple of other teachers, myself, decided we're going to form an explorers club. So we went on the cheap for $1,000 is all we paid. And the flight, I don't know, the flight was about maybe 500, but that was it for 3 months in Africa, and we went on the cheap, camping, doing every kind of thing, but mostly carrying books to scientists. Little did I realize that I was going to meet these scientists again as years passed. So there, in those days, they were starting up the Nairobi Natural History Museum. The whole thing with the museum was huge, and it was starting up. Hunting was still allowed in Kenya at that time, so it was a different feel. I mean, you had taxidermists down the main streets, and you had big game hunters and all that kind of management of the land, and also independence was just happening. The Mau Mau had calmed down. Jomo Kenyatta was in power, and he was their George Washington. It was pretty wild times, and that was in 71, and we went all the way up into the northern frontier, all the way up to the Somali border, and skirted into these places. And what got us there were the scientists, one after the other, giving us tips and how do you go and what do you do. And the other thing were believe it or not, were the missionaries. There was a whole Italian contingent up there, because in East Africa there were a lot of Italians that were, well, they were prisoners of war there. And they built the roads, more or less, a lot of them. And a lot of interest in getting up into the northern frontier. We didn't realize how wild it was until years passed. It was wild. But so that was the first touch of Africa. But in the mid-'80s, 85, 86, I was in South America with a group of people. We were doing, I was doing getting people up in trees for the Smithsonian, and also being part of a group called Operation Raleigh, which is about adventure and about service. And it was like a year off of college, but very extreme. And Prince Charles was the guy that really was pushing that. I got to meet him a little bit, and they put every character you can think of from the British out on this Operation Raleigh deal in South America, Central America, and I also went to Papua New Guinea and places like that. But I basically at that time I didn't know it. The last to know it. This is kind of how my life goes. I didn't know it, but it was right during the Sendero Luminoso War in Peru. So there we were in the deepest, darkest Peru, and there was a war going on all around us. All around us. First night, I mean, I couldn't believe it. Explosions going on, terrorists, these were the Sendero and Marxist guerrillas anyway. So the expedition got safer as we got in there further, and I ended up being in charge of it, believe it or not, and I didn't want it. My whole thing was to get people up in the trees, but I had all these college kids that I had to keep alive, so I did it. And there was one other person with me, and she was the nurse or a doctor, and her husband-to-be came out to find her because we were cut off for about 3 months. And so we all met, and he happened to be a pretty world-class climber, and lived in Nairobi, East Africa. And so we spoke. We found, he found our jungle camp. We got together, and he says, "Boy, we could really use people like you out there in Kenya," because he was growing his company, which is a safari company, and he'd been born there, and he knew everything, and we. I told him, yeah, well, it used to be pretty wild, I guess. It's from what I hear, and all these names, and we had many people in common. He says, come on out. So the next summer I came out, and then for 20 summers after that, I came out. I says, I didn't want to be a leader like that. I just wanted to, I'll take care of the wood and the water and the men and the camp, and had a camera around my neck and took pictures as we rumbled out to keep the camp together. It was right in the middle of it all. And at that point in time, hunting had stopped. And so now the whole gun was replaced with a camera. So the same elephant would be photographed thousands of times and would end up in somebody's wall, So like you see here, it's all pictured.